we're actually more successful, so we're making more money than all those guys. Men are dopes. They make horrible decisions. They're predictable. They're kind of stupid. They would start with, we are the blank for India. And my reaction to that is that, A, that's not the right way to think about India. The most important thing you can do psychologically is divorce yourself from a world where there's right and wrong. Hi, my name is Chamath Palihapitiya, the founder and CEO of Social Capital. If you take a step back, progress happens when two things come together. One is an absolutely innovative idea and approach, but the second necessary thing that you need is the catalyst of money. And if money is controlled by too few, and if the perspectives that they have are too limited or too biased, then not enough things that are truly innovative can happen. Because many of the greatest inventions in the world have been somewhat serendipitous. So I think VCs, that headline is really because of two things. Number one, it's because we're actually more successful, so we're making more money than all those guys. So I think that's a very practical reality. But the second is because our view of the world is one where we open up the aperture to more innovation from more people. Color blind, gender blind, religious blind, age blind. And that's very unsettling for a small group of people who've been spending their whole lives trying to figure out how to get into that position and stay in that position. But the problem is they bring too much baggage. And when it prevents other people, what we're doing is functionally limiting the amount of innovation that's possible. And I'm just, confident enough to tell the truth. A lot of my comments at the time were based on the following thing that I was observing, which is every time I would come here, I would get pitched by tens of companies, and they would always be saying the same thing. They would start with, we are the blank for India. And my reaction to that is that, A, that's not the right way to think about India. India is not a copycat of America or some country in Europe. It's its own country with its own customs and its own problems and opportunities. But then also B, that the person that then would give the money would then have an expectation that it would be run exactly like that company in the United States. And I just thought that was crazy. Because the reality is you can spend 5 minutes on the street and realize that this is not the same. And so it was only a matter of time until those investors got extremely skittish and nervous because the things that Indian entrepreneurs would need to do to succeed would not map to their model of what worked. And so I thought, unless we changed the game, we were in for this reckoning in 12 to 15 or 18 months where investors would just get so exacerbated and the entrepreneurs themselves wouldn't have adapted quickly enough. Now, what I would say is that in this last trip, I've been really positively surprised at how many people are willing to have the courage to present an idea that's endemically Indian. There's no obvious natural correlator or analog that you can make. And so as an investor, now I have to spend more time and be more thoughtful in really understanding the market, which is the right boundary condition for a good decision. Because now when I allocate capital, I come to it with an expectation that it will be more difficult, slightly awkward than a decision that I would have made in America for the same kind of company. A few years ago, my perspective was I would love to get at least $1 billion invested over the next 10 years. I would stick to that. I still think that that's quite probable. The thing that I would tell you is that actually I now have a broader view, and I would say that really the goal here is to be here for the next 30 to 40 years. And over that time frame, it could easily be tens of billions of dollars, quite honestly. The way that we'll invest, though, will be very methodical, and we will take our time and we'll be patient. The most obvious area today to invest in my opinion, is in financial services. And it's about expanding the consumption class in India. It's about creating mechanisms so that we transition to a fundamentally consumer-driven, consumer-led economy, where consumers and their consumption patterns represent a large percentage of GDP. When that happens, you now become a very progressive, expanding, high-growth economy that lives on many transactions and events across many hundreds of millions of people. That's a level of health that I think can support fantastic company building. So financial service first and foremost. Once that's there, then I think you'll see us transition to do things that are more typical. Healthcare, education, enterprise, And hopefully I also think that in the next 5 to 10 years, we may have the potential to do some more deep tech stuff, which we do a lot of in the United States, but frankly to date haven't found many opportunities to do that here. I ask myself because I'm the largest LP. So when I give the money, I decide. And so I'm deciding that I want to be in India. So I've already decided. But I think you bring up a very good point though about the exit environment. And I think the best way to think about exits is as follows. Again, going back to this thing that I said before, if you're raising money from outsiders trying to represent your business in the context of an American company, then you may accidentally also then misunderstand how to actually construct the right business model. You may misunderstand unit economics. You may misunderstand the cash flow cycle of a business. And as a result of that, now the path to profitability is pushed out much further into the future. And as a result of that is what we're seeing today, which is not a real surfeit of liquidity, right? There's a dearth of liquidity. So again, I would take a step back and ask ourselves if we can find the right capital, patient, with a focus on an Indian market that truly understands it, then I think we have the ability to then construct the right long-term and medium-term business model, understand the right unit economics and contribution margin profile that allows us to get to profitability sooner. And I think over the next few years, you will see many companies actually get to profitability and be in a position to go public. And I think the liquidity problem will get solved because investors like myself and local investors here, some of them who I think are exceptional, are actually helping these entrepreneurs now do that. When we make an investment, I'm asking myself, can I see myself investing hundreds of millions of dollars behind this entrepreneur and this idea? And the reason is because if you think about investing in 40 or 50 companies, the way that it's done today, all that results is in poorer returns. Because you have this diffuse approach, you don't really understand any one company well enough, and so there's just not a lot of great value creation. And history will tell you that concentration is how you drive major outcomes. So, to your point, our philosophy is very simple. Where we can allocate capital programmatically, using computers and algorithms, we do that because that's a high velocity and high turn of money. But when we make direct investments personally out of the fund, we try to do as few as possible, but we try to do many, many hundreds of millions of dollars behind each of these investments. And for us, that's been the approach that's actually allowed us to, be as successful as we've been so far. Look, I think the reality is that when you look at how value is created, inclusive environments generate the best outcomes. It's been measured every which way is possible. And so if I ask myself, what does inclusion mean for me? It means that irrespective of your birth, irrespective of your caste, of your religious affiliation, your educational makeup, across all of these dimensions, we need to be blind to all of those things and put the best people on the field. That must fundamentally include gender. And so I just have a very firm belief that gender equality is a really powerful thing that will drive economies forward, it'll drive innovation forward, and will create immense amounts of value. So it's just something that I think I have a responsibility to do. And by the way, when even in India, we already know that that's important because when you look, for example, like microfinance businesses and micro-lending businesses, we already know who the most creditworthy people are. They're women, not men. Men are dopes. They make horrible decisions. They're predictable. They're kind of stupid. And so there's a power in how women think about things and problems that I think we should just harness because we'll just be better and we'll win more. So I think it's just a very practical reality of asking the question, do we want to win? Well, if you want to win, for example, I own a basketball team. I don't say I'm going to put my buddy on the team. I draft the best people and then we put them on the team. That's how you win championships. Silicon Valley is in a bit of a mercenary culture. The reason is because there's been so much money that's come into the system that people have incentives now that go beyond mission. So if you have incentives around short-term compensation, you can hop around to any one company irrespective of what they do because so many of them are so overfunded, they will pay you huge amounts. If you cared about perks and benefits, you could do the same thing. If you cared about minimizing your commute time, you can do that. So the amount of capital that's come into Silicon Valley has unfortunately distorted the decision-making that used to govern how you would allocate your time. And so, yeah, I just think that it's one of these unfortunate byproducts that's happened there. And so as a result, I think that sometimes they don't think enough about markets and scope and geographic appeal, because they're literally suffering from such a high turnover of people, because these people don't care anymore because they can go to any other company for a whole host of other reasons that have nothing to do with the product. The most important thing you can do psychologically is divorce yourself from a world where there's right and wrong. And the reason is because when you live in a world of right and wrong, you put too much emotional pressure on yourself and psychological pressure to be right. And instead, I think you need to live in a world of learning. And if you live in this mindset, and I think the modern philosophy of it is called the growth mindset, but it's this idea that you're constantly learning things. So it's not that something went right, it's just that you learned something. It's not that something failed, it's that you learned something. And the best entrepreneurs that I've seen in Silicon Valley fundamentally have a growth mindset. They're less concerned with right and wrong. They're always concerned about trying to learn more and more every day. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, when and if you raise money, you have to be morally aligned with the people you work with. This moral alignment is so critical because companies are difficult. There are always trials and tribulations. And if you don't have an emotional connection around a higher order purpose, those relationships will be fleeting, that capital will be fleeting, and then they will put inordinate amounts of artificial pressure on you.